Everybody, welcome to another HBCU conversation here on HBCU Game Day. Joining us now, he's the commissioner of the ASUN Conference. He's Ted Gumbart, and also riding shotgun, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill from inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Ted, thank you for joining us today. And one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, we had a chance to talk online briefly, but there's been a lot of movement in the HBCU space with conference affiliations and people jumping here and there. And every time we start sourcing this information, the ASUN's name is always kind of in the mix. Like, hey, we're considering the ASUN or we talked to the ASUN. So we really wanted to get you on, and thank you for being here. What is it like right now in college athletics, being a conference, staying competitive, and seeing opportunity and trying to make the most of it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk with you guys and hopefully provide some insight that maybe your following appreciates and have some fun while we're talking and give you some insight that maybe helps develop some further conversations. But right now is very interesting times, absolutely, with the movement, with COVID, and trying to figure out how we're going to play some football in the fall and what it means if we don't. And then number one, for an ASUN style conference that's not a football sponsored conference, then how are we going to play basketball? Like, without that basketball tournament, that is our lifeline. That's where we get the largest portion of our income. And so the ongoing discussions that are multiple every week, it is a very interesting and dynamic time to be a commissioner. And we've had great conversations with our colleagues. Everybody, there's 32 Division I commissioners, and we're all facing, uncharted seas here and helping each other. So it's both challenging and gratifying at the same time. But on the movement, from the ASUN standpoint, folks may be aware that in January we announced an exploration. We were going to consider forming a new conference. And the title, at least the working title of that conference, was the United Athletic Conference. And it was intended, as the public video I released said, to group 8 schools in close proximity to play football and all sports together. And with a movement that's happened since, including and starting with A&T moving from the MEAC to the Big South, or our announcement. And I've had a lot of questions since, but what I would say is that was a very serious exploration. We've done over a year's research before we announced it. One reason we announced it is because we were afraid a moratorium might come. That all these changing times, that if the NCAA put a moratorium, that it would stop us from moving forward. So there was some thought in the timing. We got very close. Again, we don't comment publicly on any specific institution. They're either in our league or they're not in our league. But when you do try to get some news out of a commissioner and say, well, what if? Certainly willing to have some of those discussions, but we came really close. And while that particular model won't be executed according to that blueprint, there's definitely always the alternate and the next. And there's a lot of discussion throughout Division I, and we try to take part in every single piece of that, so we're aware of what's going on. Because I have 9 bosses, and they all want to build the best ASUN possible. And so I report to them, and they need to be ready with options. If they need options, I've got to have a plan to provide that.
Yes, I want to follow up on a question, Ted, in regards to the chatter out there, and what can you provide us, at least in a framework of what that looked like with a possible partnership. I know you had one most recently with the CCSA in terms of that alliance, which for those that don't know is the Coastal Collegiate Sports Association. But what about this talk with the Big South? Can you get us any information on what that looks like or why that even was out there and how that comes to be?
Yeah, those are two great pieces of the puzzle. And the ASUN, in our position in Division one of the things we try to do to distinguish ourselves is we're not afraid. We will try things. We will be out there first. ESPN actually will tell you we were the first conference to agree that we would do broadcasts from our campuses. And when they built ESPN3, the digital network, we actually signed on when they were still ESPN 360, and we didn't have any idea how we would broadcast that signal. We knew we had to do it, said, let's go. Well, we can be nimble and try things. If it doesn't work, we go on to the next thing. The ACC, they can't miss. They can't start a network and have it fail. So we can do a little bit of different projects as the ASUN, and it's a place where we can be nimble and experiment a bit. So the CCSA was a conference originally put together for swimming. The MEAC, the Big South, the Southern, and the ASUN. We all had 3 swimmers, and nobody wanted to start it because, why would we support a conference sport that only 3 of our leagues did? So we made an independent league. So CCSA started as the Coastal Collegiate Swimming Association, and it is a Division I conference. It's just not a multi-sport conference, but we're already a member of the NCAA. We pay our NCAA dues, and now we sponsor men and women's swimming, and we sponsor beach volleyball, which includes LSU and Florida State and South Carolina. And so we touch a lot of different schools at a lot of different levels. Delaware State and Howard play women's lacrosse in our group. We've had A&T and Howard and FAMU at the time swimming. Those were the 3 MEAC programs that were swimming with us. So the idea that you can invent something to cross over and solve problems, we like that. So the Big South football relationship, we have a deal that says if a school joins the ASUN, that provided they're within a geographic parameters, we will run it by the Big South and let them know we're talking to a school that plays football. And they don't have a veto power, but they can let us know their thoughts, opinions, and maybe say, hey, if you don't mind putting in a condition, on their football program, this would be helpful. And so that was what we got built, and Kennesaw State benefits from that. So they have a conference to play in, and that agreement allowed us to add North Alabama. I don't think they could have come into our conference if we didn't have a football home built in. So that agreement is still in place, and we actually have in discussion some modifications that would encourage that population to grow to at least 12. Because if we had 12, then the Big South could sponsor 6, and the ASUN could sponsor 6, and we could both have an AQ to the playoffs. So again, it's all a matter of discussing the options, and my educational background is in business and management, and I got my MBA at Stetson. That it's got to be a market-based solution. You can think up all the things. We can sit around and well, not in a restaurant right now. We can enjoy a meal and say like, "Hey, what if?" And that's fun, but it's got to be a market solution that presidents will agree to. And, it's hard enough to get 8 presidents to agree on one thing. We're talking about multiple schools involved, and it's a little more complex. But again, I tell people if we're in higher ed, if we're afraid of a challenge and we're afraid of a complex issue, then, we need to find something else to do.
No doubt.
How big of a challenge, Ted? Talking with Ted Gumbart, he is the commissioner of the ASUN. We've heard so much about geography, travel, location, time spent away from classrooms, the expenses that are incurred because of that. Is that a challenge that all conferences are facing? And the reason I ask is because it was so interesting just it feels like yesterday, it seemed like the cool or neat thing to do was to expand your conference as big as possible. We had Texas was almost in the ACC, and they just went, crazy with expansion. Is that something now that is a challenge for everyone?
I would say absolutely yes. I mean, you've got the schools at the top of the revenue stream model, and it's very heavily weighted towards media income. And if you're not playing a game, you're not realizing the media income. And it's just like the NCAA basketball tournament. If you don't provide the content, you don't get paid. And the higher leveraged you are in your cash flow position that you can't fund without that money, then you're going to see schools at the very top layer start to furlough people. And so I would say that it's absolutely focused on geography, and it really is a return to what makes sense. We're all old enough to remember when conferences, the basic premise was geography. Find a group of 8 that are all next to each other and let's play for championship. So there's definitely a movement there, and I think a lot of people welcome it. That let's get back to what makes more sense, and it's okay to be diverse as a membership, but maybe geography is not one of the areas you want to be diverse in.
I wanted to jump in here next, but real quickly, what are the states that are your states ideal if you were to invite and accept more members in?
Well, I would tell you that's a simple equation right now. We actually had a meeting 2 days ago with our full President's Council, and then a meeting today with what we call our Futures Committee. And they're all scheduled to meet, at least every other week in this dynamic times. But we agreed that one of the elements we're after is starting football in the ASUN. That's not been a secret. We announced that in January. We're trying to find a way to do that. And the second thing, if we have Louisville, Kentucky as kind of the northwest point, then you go over to Virginia where Liberty is, and then draw a line down to the tip of Florida. That's a triangle that if we were picking, we would like to have enough schools to play football. So we have 2 in Kennesaw and UNA. We'd have to add 4. And we could take an affiliate or 2, but we'd like to have 4 additional schools, and ideally they'd be in that triangle or within an easy bus drive for that triangle. So that's a goal. You can't always dictate all the outcomes, but that's something that we're certainly.
I wanted to pick up, Ted, a little more back in regards to the highlights you said with diversity. From an institutional perspective, and obviously we can view diversity in a lot of different ways, program offering size, public, private. But specifically, I wanted to focus in the diversity of HBCU programs, and with the CCSA in regards to what you did with swimming and how you partnered with 3 HBCUs at the time that offered swimming with FAMU and Howard and North Carolina A&T. But from that perspective, I also hear with your business background and as a professor of sports management at Texas Southern University, I'm really excited about how you look at innovation. And so can you tie in diversity and innovation specifically at HBCUs and why they could be a viable option as we're hearing coming out there with some that had some interest in terms of they looked at their options. Why is that important in general, and why is that particularly important to you as the leader of the Athletic Sun?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, if there's any technical difficulties, please announce that they're on my side. I'm not at my office, and I'm actually not at my primary residence where I have a great connection. So blame the ASUN commissioner. The audio and the video aren't in sync. And I promise a return engagement when I have a better connection. But you hit it on the head. There's an opportunity for innovation, for diversity, and for inclusion, which I'll give you my philosophy, and hopefully anybody that you talk to would share that this has been my approach. I have to respond to the ASUN. That's my job. But we all work in a broader setting of collegiate athletics. And part of the reason we wanted to start the CCSA is because there were student athletes that did not have a championship opportunity. And that shouldn't be. If you're a Division I program, you should have access to a championship. So we developed that. And one of the things that's going on now, obviously you guys have been busy talking to Charles McClellan. He's had a lot of things to talk about recently. Well, we are all certainly aware of the dynamics. And right now the MEAC needs a plan to find out how they can keep the group they have and remain providing that opportunity. What I like to do is expand opportunity. I don't want to do anything that would reduce opportunity. So the way we've approached that, in the Southern Conference, we have a lacrosse relationship. We started with 5, and that's about 7 years ago. And then we built that to 14. Well, when we got to 12, we split, and the Southern Conference has a championship and the ASUN has a championship. Now the sport has grown to where 4 of our affiliates are going to move and start it in their own conference, the Mid-American Conference. And so we're losing Akron and Kent State and Detroit, and we no longer have enough for 2. So we're playing in 2 groups of 5 this year, and next year we'll consolidate back into 1 group. So nobody loses access. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to put a model together and said, look, why can't we do that with football? Why can't we do that with, if we can do it with swimming and beach volleyball and women's lacrosse, we should be able to figure that out and build a flexible relationship with a conference so that you support each other. And so we're investigating some of those options that would maintain and even expand opportunities. And it has to involve the HBCUs, because the geography part, you can't deny that. And I personally believe that, everyone should have a place and everyone should be, content with their spot. If there's somebody in our conference that decides, there's a better setting, and that just happened. NJIT, it was a great partnership. We needed a Division I school. They needed a conference. Our people were excited about going once a year to the big city, and they were excited, about having a conference access and AQ, and they have a big contingent in Florida. So that worked. Well, with COVID and no travel and nobody wants to get on an airplane, that doesn't work anymore. And we had some fun on Twitter about the initial announcement came out that NJIT was leaving the Atlantic Sun. And I said, that's inaccurate. And everybody responded that, commissioner denies they're leaving. And I said, no, I never said that. I said it was inaccurate. The inaccuracy was we are the ASUN Conference. And Jeff Goodman was the one that first reported that. And we ended up having a laugh over it, and it was fine. But I actually was in on that with their president and their AD at the very beginning. They said, look, we're not going to break any of our commitments to the ASUN, but what do you think? And I said, let me talk to our folks. I think the rationale is right on, and it's not the best place for you to be if you have an option. So we discussed it, and we made sure they had an option. We made sure they were pleased, and we made sure our people supported it, and we chose to go from 10 to 9. So if in difficult times, if we will dump some of the guardrails that hold us from making certain decisions and be willing to just blue sky it a little bit. And then when you get a little confused, come back to the student. If we focus on their experience, I think we end up in good places. But yes, we're totally supportive of innovation and preserving and expanding opportunities, but we've got to get people to be willing to step out, and whether it's conference alignment or even just, as you said, the diversity issues that are percolating around the country now. It'd be awesome if 2020 was remembered in the history books as the year we changed the race relations equation and COVID became a footnote. That'd be pretty cool.
Ted, let me ask you this. Me and Dr. Gavil have kind of had this conversation, and we've gone at it from different angles. If the Big South, if some combination of you in the Big South, whatever the future potentially could, might, maybe hold, if there was a situation where there were a block of HBCUs in a conference, let's say 4, along with PWI schools, how dynamic of an environment could that be when you have these schools who have never had, long-term relationships before, or are suddenly bed partners and fighting for championships potentially? How dynamic of a product could that be for you to sell to the marketplace in theory?
All right. Well, number one, I would say I think it would be tremendous. And one of the things that, we've been lucky enough to be thinking about this for 4 or 5 years. So we've lined up a number of contingencies that could help us. And if we had started the new conference, that's a brand new conference. Your media contract is wide open. The championship for football, the championship for basketball, all become new content. So it's a new revenue stream that those people can split. And if you diversify your audience, that only makes your sponsorship value higher. You need to reach eyeballs, and the internet allows them to track how many places you're getting to and where they are. And it's so sophisticated as to how they can track your reach that the broader and more diverse your reach is, the more valuable your product is in the marketplace. But again, revenue is part of the equation. I think it's more than just athletics and higher ed. We've all been aware of the social dynamics going on, and it's very encouraging to have open dialogue where people are being honest. And people like George Will, who's a conservative columnist, writing that it's time for change. We need to use our vote. And the idea that it's okay to talk to someone and say, well, yeah, we have 6 people that are Black on our staff, and they need to get some reassurance that this is a safe place, that it's okay to talk about that we need to make this moment more of a movement and not let it slip away. So the whole idea of HBCUs and the cultural aspects of it, we all need to be learning. And I've told folks, I said, look, I'm an older white male who came from privilege. I was probably upper middle class. I mean, my dad drove a used Volkswagen Beetle because he was a Yankee. He was cheap. But, we always had shoes. So I'm not the one that's going to be speaking. I need to be listening. I need to learn. And when I can say I understand what microaggression is, I understand what some of the issues are that being raised with skin of a different color, it's time for us to start doing things instead of talking about it. And yeah, I've read a couple of books, and one of them is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I think it's a tremendous thought for people, that are white. Say, get in the game now. Come on. And there is no neutral. You've got racist ideas and thoughts, or you are anti-racist. And so we're really excited about that whole dynamic. And we've got a new program we're going to launch. I'll tell you about in a minute. But yes, I think that broadening the scope of all that we do would be tremendous. And I think about, when student athletes go on the road, we need to build in a stop at a museum or build in a stop at someone's historic home or even a statue. If you're coming to Macon, go look at the Otis Redding statue and think about, why we have one. If you're playing Alabama State in a non-conference game, we got a couple schools that do, but go down and look at some of the history that's there. We all benefit when we learn. So just let's keep being students and learning.
Well said, Ted. We probably have about 2 minutes left here on the call. Quickly, tell us about something you guys are doing in the conference, a new video series that's trying to create some engagement and dialogue with your student athletes.
Yeah, we've got an initiative that our presidents endorsed without reservation. One of the things we felt we could do in an action phase, we've got a pretty good video team. We do a lot of interviews and video programming, just like you guys are doing. It's terrific. And we're going to start a teammates series. And the teammate series is going to be specifically to engage students and coaches and others in our community to just talk about the race relations and acknowledge that there's inequity and acknowledge that we need to continue to address it. And until it's equal, we're not in a fair and just society that we all, think from some mindsets that everything's equal, and it's not. And so we need to be active in engaging that dialogue and finding ways to address it. So again, we want to listen and learn, we want to share, and we want to be active. And we think that when you are on a team, you can respect your teammates. And you don't love every one of them the same, and you don't hang out with them, but when you're on the same team, you trust and support them to get to a goal. And if we can all be teammates, then maybe we can help the country move towards a better spot where we respect and trust each other. And so that's the idea, the Teammates Initiative. And we just want to be part of the dialogue and not sit on the sidelines anymore. It's too important to stay silent.
Well, I'll tell you what, we enjoyed it. One thing they say in entertainment, always leave them wanting more. I think a lot of people might feel that way about the conversation we had today. Ted Gumbart, Commissioner of the ASUN, thank you so much for joining us here on HBCU Game Day. Great conversation, great information. There's a lot going on in the world, and we have to tell the story from all sides and get all perspectives so we can give you the information that you need to continue the conversation about HBCU sports. Thank you again to Dr. Cavill and for Ted Gumbart for joining us today. If you're watching on YouTube, man, subscribe, sign up for notifications so you can always stay on top of the latest content from us here at HBCU Game Day. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you later.